Last time I forgot to record. Okay. So I'm really glad that for those of you that were in our class last week, that you wanted to come back for another week. And we have some people on that weren't here last week, and I'm just so excited to share this information. Herbs have blessed my life so much, and I just love to share that information with others. So let me just jump in to, let's see. There we go. So this is for Grace. If you'll remember in the last class, we talked about this amazing owie spray that you can use to mix up and just kind of have it on hand to spray on any kind of abrasion, burn, anything skin related. And Grace asked, well, what do you do if you're allergic to lavender? And so I had to kind of look that up. I could tell you 20 herbs that you could replace it with, but this is made with essential oils. So you can see in the blue here, under where it says lavender, you could also use in essential oil form, rosemary, yarrow, helichrysum, geranium, or a blend that I love by Butterfly Express called Valley. Those are all oils that have skin regenerative properties. So they would replace the action of lavender because that's why lavender's in this blend. Or another option is in step 3, where you see it tell you to add fractionated coconut oil. You could use a soaked oil, which is just an herb soaked in oil, like comfrey oil or calendula oil in place of that coconut, because both of those herbs are skin regenerative. They're vulneraries is what we call them. They stimulate new cells to grow. So any one of those options would be able to replace lavender and bring those skin regenerative properties to the blend. But I just cannot get over the difference between day 1 and day 7 in these pictures, showing you what healing properties plants have. So just as a little bit of review from our last week's class, 2 guiding principles to successful herbal medicine. You always treat the underlying cause, and then you treat the symptoms that you're having right now. And I find that I generally always will turn to herbs to treat the underlying cause because they are most suitable for internal use, and they have their molecular structure is more intact than oils that have undergone a steam distillation process and lost some of the molecules that have healing properties. But I like to use essential oils and herbs both to treat for symptoms. So that just kind of clarifies how I use those 2 things in my home. And I do use both herbs and essential oils. Another principle is to treat early, often, and after you feel better for a few days, just to make sure that you have really gotten the end of the bacteria or the end of the virus. The best time to start treating something is that moment that you know something's off. The scratchy throat, the cough starting, the sore throat. That's when you are reaching for herbs to start addressing underlying cause and then whatever the symptoms are. So we learned last time that herbs are categorized by their therapeutic actions. And that's what your handout that we're going to use today is all about. The key to knowing how to use herbs effectively is to know what action you're trying to accomplish in the body, and then being able to select from herbs with the right actions. Part of the problem with only having an herb book that, where you look up bladder infection and it gives you a list of 10 herbs, if you don't know why those herbs are listed, you have no idea which herb to reach for. And if you just spent $100 on herbs to treat other things, you could look at that list of herbs that are listed for the ailment you're trying to treat now and be completely disgusted because nothing that you just bought is on the list that you're being given in your book. But if you understand therapeutic actions, you know that if you're looking for an antibacterial herb, there's 20 you can choose from, and you just need one. And so if you have a selection of herbs in your home, chances are something you already have will have the action that you want rather than just having to rely on what a book is telling you. So understanding therapeutic actions is, I think, the key to really being effective as an herbalist and to get the results that you want. And we're gonna talk about that today as we kind of go through some different ailments. So where do you start? We talked last time about getting a good herbal book and reading it. You don't have to memorize the information. Just know where to find it. Become familiar with the different categories of herbs and start familiarizing yourself with the best herbs in each category. You will find that a lot of herbs show up in multiple categories. So you don't have to have 100 different herbs. You just need to start looking at the herbs that are the best in each category, and you'll see the same herbs popping up over and over. And then you know that that's an herb that would be good to add to your herbal medicine cabinet. So after you get a good herbal book, the next best place to start for a beginner is to pick one thing in your family that you want to learn how to address herbally. And then you acquire the supplies and the herbs to address that one thing. And then when you move on to the next thing and the next thing, you start getting a good selection of herbs to work with, just like you would stock your pantry as a newlywed. You pick one recipe and you buy all the herbs and spices for that. And then you gain the ingredients for additional recipes as you kind of grow your supplies. These ailments that are listed here are all things that I want to talk about today. If we do not get through all of them, the rest of this list would be our next class. At the end of this class, I just have some tips and tricks and just protocols of things that I've felt impressed to share, of things that I've developed just with working with my own family and clients. That we'll get to that in the end if we have time, and if not, that could be a third class if there is interest for it. So the handout you should have printed out looks like this. Like I said, as we get going, I want lots of participation. So if you have something to say, just unmute your microphone and jump right in. So this class, we're going to be using this quick reference chart to kind of get you familiar with using different categories of herbs to address these common ailments that we just had a list of. We'll do a question and answer, and then we'll see how much more information I can fit in. So just to kind of let you know what I do at my house, I have a cabinet that I keep common single herbs that are ready to use. They're herbs that I've purchased dried from sources like, now I can't even think of the source, Mountain, gosh, now that I'm on the spot teaching a class, I can't remember, Mountain Rose Herbs, sorry. Mountain Rose Herbs or Butterfly Express, Western Botanicals. I just buy them dried. I make a tincture, which is an alcohol extract. And I store the rest of the herb in the foil bag that it came in. And then when I reach for the herb, it's usually in the extract form that I am using it. They are very easy to make, and there are instructions to make them in the materials that I'm making available to you on the page where I kind of have listed all the references and the resources. And I'll give you that website again at the end of this class, but it's very easy to do. But that's primarily what I do. Occasionally, there are some formulas that I buy ready-made that I really like because they contain herbs that I may only use in that formula. So I'm not going to buy a whole big bag of it. But I do a lot of single herbs, and then I just mix them together depending on what kind of thing I'm trying to accomplish. So we're going to practice being Dr. Mom. So what I'm going to do is try really hard to make this work. We're going to switch to my whiteboard. Okay, so you have your handout ready, and I want you to look at your list through all those categories of verbs, and I want you to tell me, let's see, I want you to tell me what you would do. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, before this class, I've had a really incredibly stressful week, and I was feeling a little bit anxious, and I had difficulty in calming myself down, and I had a little bit of a nervous cough. I took Lobelia. I took 2 dropperfuls of Lobelia before this class. Can anybody look on your list and look at the places that Lobelia shows up and tell me why you think I chose that herb? And I'll just give you a minute to look at the list, and we'll see who chimes in with a thought.
Anybody?
I think it's number 3, the expectorant.
Yep, I did use it for its expectorant properties. There's one more.
Nervines.
Yep, I used it because it's a nervine. I was a little
Yep.
stressed out, had some tension. I needed to calm my nervous system. Another thing about Lobelia is it is a bronchial dilator. So in addition to being an expectorant, it's a premier asthma herb because it actually dilates the bronchial passageways. Okay, so good. That's exactly the right idea. That's what I want you guys to do. Okay, so for the next one, so for the first couple, I'm going to start out with things that really only use 1 or 2 categories, just to kind of get you thinking. And then we'll move on to more complex things where you might be working in multiple categories for the same illness. So we're going to say your teenage son comes home and you recognize that he has some kind of a foot fungus. Like he's got some athlete's foot. Okay. As an herbalist, what's the underlying cause? And what category of herbs are you going to reach for to address that fungus? And then somebody tell me 1 herb that you might choose.
Tea tree.
Ah, tea tree, because of what property?
Antifungal.
Right. So tea tree oil is super easy to dose. I don't have to make a tea. I don't even have to reach for a tincture. I love to use tea tree oil just because you just basically would dump it in a little bin of water and let him do a foot soak. I would probably do that at least once a day for like 10 days. Now, when you're dealing with something that's manifesting topically, I always like to address it from the inside out and then topically as well. So I'm going to have my stinky teenage son with his athlete's foot. I'm going to have him do a foot bath in tea tree oil. And then I'm going to look at that list of antifungal herbs, and I'm going to have him take something internally as well, because the best way to address most things that are manifesting externally is really to work systemically as well. So I could choose any one of these on the list. Oregon grape, there's a list of probably 20 of them. I only put a few here, but it doesn't matter which one you choose. Pick one. And so I would have him be doing something internal, and I would probably have him take a dropper full once or twice a day. If it was a new infection, I might just do it once a day. If he'd had it for a while and it was pretty entrenched, I'd probably have him be doing the foot bath and the herbs internally twice a day. And I would have him continue to do it until his skin was completely clear, and probably for maybe a week afterwards, just to make sure that it didn't come back. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Antifungal, that's just one category. Let's say you have a newborn baby or an infant that's fussy and you suspect colic. Okay, what category am I going to be looking in, and what's an herb that I might choose?
Carminative, and I would choose peppermint because I have used that before.
Okay, peppermint is great. Now, this is one fun thing about herbs. Everybody has their favorites. I happen to love chamomile and catnip together. That's just my favorite. But the awesome thing is that peppermint would work. Chamomile by itself would work. You could use, I wouldn't use ginger for a baby. You do want to choose the most gentle herbs with babies' little systems. So the great thing about herbs is the flexibility. If you understand the therapeutic action that you're trying to accomplish, you have a whole list of herbs to choose from, and you're not limited to using what someone else uses. You can develop your own favorites. So yeah, you'd use a carminative. Now, some of those carminative herbs, like chamomile, are also nervines, which is number 14, which are calming and soothing. So by choosing an herb like, and peppermint actually is a nervine too. So by choosing an herb that is in more than one category that would be beneficial, that's a smart herb choice. So when you're looking in the categories, trying to choose the carminative, by knowing that, okay, chamomile is a carminative, but it's also a nervine and I want that property too. By understanding these plants, you can make choices that will give you the best results by utilizing all the properties of the plant.
Is there a way to know which ones are the most gentle for babies?
You just have to know the plant and to read about it. That's why it's just a good idea to, if you have an herbal book, just read a page of it. You know, I keep my herb books by my bed, and I'll just open it up and just read when I have a few minutes, so that you have that information kind of in the back of your mind. And we know that the Holy Ghost will bring information to our awareness when we need it. So if we're doing our part in trying to acquire that information, it'll be brought to our mind when we need it. And I have had that happen so many times. So that's the value of reading and just kind of being familiar with the plants. Chamomile is always a great choice for babies. Catnip. You just kind of get a feel for which ones are more gentle and which ones are more aggressive as you get comfortable with the different herbs. Okay, so that was carminative.
Can I ask a question?
Michelle?
real
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead. Ask a
Sorry.
question.
So how would you use the chamomile and catnip for the baby?
Okay, so I would use an extract. In the files that I give you, there's directions to make 2 different kinds of extracts. One's in
Yeah,
a
glycerin.
yeah, so you're going to want a glycerin base for children. It's just as easy to make. It's just a different, basically with an extract, you're soaking the herb in some kind of a solvent. Water is a solvent. That's what you're doing with herbal tea, but it's very weak, which is why you need to take a cup at a time, right?
Yeah.
Tinctures, your doses are usually between 10 and 20 drops. With kids, you're going to want to use a glycerin base. And for a baby, if I was dosing chamomile, which is so safe that you can't overdose on it, I would just put the drops right in the side of the baby's cheek, and give it to them directly. I wouldn't even try it. Chamomile or glycerin is very sweet, and so kids take it without any problem at all. So I would just give the extract directly.
So if you want a good book, there is one called The Herb Book And it has a great big chapter that is specifically on herbs for children and babies especially. But I don't recall, it's been a long time ago, so I don't recall if it talks about tinctures, but it does talk about the herbs for the babies.
Yeah, and if you have a book that explains each, where you can look up each individual herb, and that kind of gives you some information about the therapeutic actions, that's a great reference. You want to look for a book that doesn't focus on exotic Chinese herbs, because we don't live in China. We want herbs that grow here. So that would be, for me and you, that's in the Intermountain West, right?
That native to us.
Right, because I firmly believe there's going to come a time where we cannot order herbs on the internet. We're going to have to go out and we're going to have to wildcraft them. So we might as well learn about the herbs that grow near us. And that's one thing about me, is if it's something that I have to have harvested and cultivated in China, I'm really not that interested in it, even if it's a great herb. I believe that Heavenly Father gave us plants with the properties that we need, no matter where we live. There are a few herbs, very rare cases, where they aren't native to the United States, and the only place to get them is foreign, but not very often. I try to avoid those.
So is it legal to go ahead and go out and find them?
Well, yes.
The reason I'm asking is because I was talking to Rinda about that just today. And there are certain ones I would really like to be able to go and have a class on doing something like that, if it was possible, to drive and meet or whatever. I would do that.
Okay, so there's a guy, one of my mentors, Dr. Patrick Jones. He's the homegrownherbalist.net. He does herb walks, and he lives in where is he? He's south of me and I'm in Rexburg, but he will film his walks, his herb walks, and he takes you out into his garden and he shows you what they look like in the wild, and he shows you where they like to grow and everything, so that you can recognize them. And I will put that resource on my page. As long as you avoid private property, obviously. There's nothing that we would want to collect that is an endangered species. A lot of the stuff just grows in the wilderness. I'm like, in any vacant field that hasn't been sprayed, you could probably go out and find 5 things that you would want to harvest. Just make sure that it has not been sprayed. But wildcrafting, some people are really drawn to the growing and the gardening and the going out into the wild and picking it. And I need to be better about recognizing plants in the wild. I prefer to buy them dried and just know what to do with them. But I really, in order to be more self-reliant, I need to learn how to recognize them in the wild. So I'm hoping when the time comes, the Lord pairs me with someone who's studied wildcrafting, and then they bring the stuff to me, and then I can tincture it and then know how to use it. Okay. So let me do another one that might be pretty easy. Okay. Blood pressure. The doctor wants your husband to go on blood pressure medication, but you just want to try some herbs first. What category would I reach for?
The
And what's
hypotensives.
hypotensive? And so
Cayenne.
hawthorn is probably the hawthorn and cayenne are your premier heart herbs. So any one on that list would be of value, but I love hawthorn and I love cayenne. Cayenne is also the #1 crisis herb. Every household should have cayenne that you can use medicinally because of what it can do in times of crisis. Okay, so for these single ones, I'm not going to use the whiteboard as much because there's only one category. So you're right, you'd use a hypotensive. Diarrhea. You have a bad case of abdominal cramping and diarrhea. What are you going to reach for?
Astringents and antispasmodics.
That's right. Now, I told you in the last class, for a very long time, I used exclusively astringents. I would reach for something like agrimony, or uva ursi is another one. I love yarrow. Yarrow grows like a weed in our part of the state. I would have pretty good success, but it wasn't until I learned that if you combine an astringent with an antispasmodic, that's when the magic happens. So that's why it's important to understand how the different categories work. So an antispasmodic, cramp bark, is probably one that you could use no matter where you're trying to stop spasms. But you could use any one of those on the list. But see, if you look like, for example, lobelia, right? If I have somebody who's having a spasming cough, and I need an antispasmodic, as I'm looking at the list of antispasmodics, well, I know that some of these herbs are also expectorants. So if I'm treating a cough, I'm going to choose an herb that has other properties that I need to make that the use of that herb even better. So that's why you know your herbs. But to stop diarrhea, a dropper full of any one of those. I love angelica seed. Now with diarrhea is oftentimes the body's way of getting something out of its system. So I don't treat diarrhea for 24 hours unless, well, no, actually I always will wait 24 hours, because you don't want to stop the body from getting rid of something that it's trying to get rid of. If you've had some bad food or you've got a bacteria going through your system, let your body get rid of that. And then I would start treating the diarrhea. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's something that actually just happened to me recently. My dog was running in the back field and got caught in some barbed wire. And she came running up to the house with a gaping open wound in her side. Now, as an herbalist, with an open wound like that, I'm going to have two main concerns. My first concern is going to be bleeding, because that's life-threatening in the moment. She wasn't bleeding a lot. If she was bleeding, if that wound was gushing blood, what would I do?
Cayenne.
Cayenne. Why cayenne?
It stops
Stops the bleeding.
Yeah, it's a hemostatic. Okay? So yarrow, cayenne, shepherd's purse, uva ursi, doesn't matter which one, they're all hemostatic. I'm going to, if I had powdered cayenne or any of those herbs in powdered form, I would grab a handful of the powder, the dried powder, and I would pack it right onto that wound. If I had tincture, I would drop the tincture right out of the bottle, right onto that wound. If it was something where I could see the source of bleeding, I might take a piece of gauze and soak it in one of those herbs, the tincture, and put it right on the wound and put pressure on it if it was that kind of a wound. But that's why it's important, if you have all of your herbs in your cabinet and they're in their dried form, but they're still in chunks, in a situation like that, you're going to have to do something with that herb before you can use it. You're going to either have to grind it up, you're going to wish you'd made a tincture, or you're going to have to make a tea. So there is great value in having your herbs stored in a way that is ready to use. Alcohol tinctures will store indefinitely. They're a great thing to put in your emergency preparedness if you store them in a place away from heat and light. Okay, so hemostatics, that's the first thing. That's a life-threatening thing. You have to stop the bleeding before you think about anything else. My dog wasn't bleeding. I just saw where the skin had been opened, and I could see like what looked like raw meat. I could see flesh. As an herbalist, what's my next concern?
Antibacterial.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm going to be concerned about infection. Now, infection, if it's untreated, you know that once it gets in the blood, you run the risk of sepsis, and that can be life-threatening. So that is a huge concern. I'm going to be using antibacterial herbs before I try to repair that wound. I'm going to be thinking of infection. And that's true pretty much anytime you have broken skin, right? So antibacterial herbs, broad spectrum antibiotic herbs, there's a list of them there. Doesn't matter which one you reach for one and get it on that wound. I'm probably going to be using it on whatever the wound is. That's what I did with the dog, right? But if it's a skinned knee, if it's anything with an open wound, you're going to be using that topically. You're going to be using that internally as well. So that's your antibiotic. So then my next concern is getting the wound to heal. Now, I actually have been trained in suturing, so I can suture if needed. Something to bear in mind is yarrow in its herbal form or its essential oil form also has the added property that it will draw the edges of a wound together. And that's something unique to yarrow. That is a very good herb to have in your emergency preparedness. I have it actually in herbal form and essential oil form. And I like the blue yarrow because the hemostatic properties are more pronounced in the blue yarrow. So you've stopped bleeding, you've addressed the potential for infection, and I'm going to be using those antibiotic herbs internally for probably at least 10 days with a wound serious as what my dog had. The next thing that I did was to focus on getting the wound to heal. So I went to vulnerary herbs, which is number 30 on your list. I took dried comfrey, I put it in a blender and turned it into a powder. I mixed a paste and I packed the comfrey paste on some gauze, put it right on the wound, bandaged it up, and changed it every day. Within the first 24 hours, we could see that the flesh that looked like raw meat, within 24 hours, it was not red anymore, it was pink. And we could see where new skin, like where the body was covering that up with what eventually became a scab. And then she's still actually in the process of getting rid of that scab, but the comfrey accelerates healing. So that's my protocol for dealing with wounds in people or animals. Okay. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of go down and tell you, if you have a bloody nose, you're also going to use a hemostatic herb. I love cayenne in a little bit of water. A couple drops of cayenne in some water, you drink it. If the bloody nose hasn't stopped in 5 minutes, you give it again. And then you give it again 5 minutes later, and that'll usually do it. Cayenne also strengthens vein structure. So if you're having bloody noses because you have a weak vein in your nose, cayenne will stop the bleeding in the moment and also repair the weak vein. Okay, coughing. You have someone who's coughing. If it's a wet cough where you know there's something in the lungs that you want to cough up, what are you going to use?
An expectorant.
Yes, removing bronchial secretions. I like to use lobelia because it's also a bronchial dilator, but anything on that list would work. Horsetail is also very soothing. Let's see, comfrey should be on that list. It's also an expectorant. Oh, it is on that list. Comfrey is also a demulcent herb, number 5 on the list, which coats and soothes irritated tissues. So comfrey would be a great choice. In addition to that, I'm going to be using essential oils. I love essential oils for respiratory symptoms. So I'm going to be putting a respiratory blend right on the chest. I might use eucalyptus as a single oil, but most essential oil suppliers have a good respiratory blend. For Butterfly Express, you've got Deeper or Breezy and Aspire. Isn't it Breathe for doTERRA? Most companies, they have a respiratory blend that's kind of part of their main product line. I'm going to be using that just like you would Vicks, right? Vicks Vapor Rub, which has nothing therapeutic in it, by the way. But those respiratory blends that you apply topically, they are going to open the airways. They're going to help expectorate, depending on what's in the blend. I'm going to use those both together. Okay, now it's nighttime, and you want to calm the cough down so that the person can sleep. So I'm not going to give an expectorant anymore because I don't want to encourage coughing to continue. What am I going to use to calm the cough so that they can sleep? What do you think?
Well, probably the demulcent with something else.
Yep, with something else. A demulcent, anytime you have inflamed, irritated tissues anywhere in the body, I'm going to use a demulcent, whether you're dealing with a bladder infection or you've got irritation in the lungs or a sore throat, anytime you need to soothe tissues. So yeah, a demulcent,
What about
absolutely.
inflammatory?
Ooh, anti-inflammatory. That is a really good choice, but there's actually a category that would be a better fit.
Hypnotics.
If someone has trouble sleeping, yeah, but I'm going to use an antispasmodic
That's what I was gonna
because
say.
when someone is, that's a muscle spasm, right? That the compulsive cough that someone can't control, those are muscles spasming. So I'm going to give a nice antispasmodic. Wild cherry bark is amazing for cough. There is a cough syrup blend that Butterfly Express does called WC that has a great combination of expectorants and demulcents and infection fighters, and that's actually what I use for coughs. Is I keep some of that WC on hand. The thing about Butterfly Express that I like is you can get the recipe out of the book and make your own. You can buy the dry herb pack that's already formulated and you just dump it in a jar and cover it with alcohol or glycerin. In the case of WC, you want to use glycerin. Or you can buy the tincture already made. So I like that flexibility. Okay. Internal bleeding. If there's been an accident of some sort and you suspect internal bleeding, if you're dealing with kidney stones and you see blood in the urine, if you have blood in the urine due to a kidney infection, like a UTI, any kind of internal bleeding, you're going to use a hemostatic to stop the bleeding. Let's see. Okay, so now let's talk about something where you're going to be using multiple herbs to deal with symptoms and underlying cause. So let's talk about seasonal allergies. How many people suffer from that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What's the underlying cause for seasonal allergies? What do you think? What's happening in the body that's causing you to have an allergic response?
I would guess something in the liver.
Yes. I can't see who's making these comments. But
Sorry.
No, you
It's
know what
Amy.
you're talking about. Oh, well, I'm really glad that you're here because we've studied herbs together for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. Seasonal allergies, you're having a histamine response. Okay. Histamines, oh, I got to get my spelling right. Histamines are processed in the liver. So the first thing you're going to do to address that response is to get the liver functioning properly because that's what the body has designed to deal with the histamines. Okay, so you're going to work on the liver. Okay, so what category is liver herbs, and give me one that you would use.
That's hepatic. And I think the only one I have is milk thistle.
Okay, now your hepatic herbs actually are liver restoratives.
Oh, restorative. Okay.
So I'm going to need a liver stimulant, which is going to be right above it on the list. That's a cholagogue.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to stimulate the liver. Any one of those would be fantastic. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to stimulate the liver. The best time to start doing this, if you know you have chronic allergies, is about 2 weeks before allergy season starts. Okay, so you're going to be working on the liver. Now you can also take herbal antihistamines. Look on the list and tell me one.
Chamomile.
Yep, chamomile. Now we know that chamomile's gentle because we know that's good for babies, right? Chamomile will work. Because I get miserable with seasonal allergies, if I have something like Brigham tea, which is my favorite, or even nettles, which is going to be a little bit more potent, I'm going to reach for that. But if I have chamomile, I'm going to use it. With gentle herbs, chamomile is gentle, echinacea is gentle. You have to take those herbs a little bit more frequently. So as you get a feel for which ones are the real powerhouses and which ones are gentle, know that gentle acting herbs might have to be taken 3 times a day, maybe 4 times a day. If you've got something that's really acute. You could probably get away with taking Brigham tea or nettles a little bit less often, but any one of those antihistamines is going to work. Okay, so now I am addressing the underlying cause with those things. What are the symptoms that I want to address right now?
Yeah, everything itches.
Right. Okay, so that's another area where essential oils are awesome. I'm going to be using things like eucalyptus, lemon, myrtle, just to anything respiratory, because that just helps open things up. You could use an astringent. Okay, if you look at number 4 on the list, astringents reduce secretions, right? So that's going to help dry up a runny nose. A couple dropperfuls of yarrow in with your liver herbs, you're going to notice a difference in anything where you've got extra fluid. Okay, so that's seasonal allergies. Let's say you have a bladder infection. What's the underlying cause of a bladder infection?
Bacteria.
Yep. So tell me an herb I'm going to use to address the underlying cause.
20, an antibacterial broad spectrum.
Yep.
Yeah, like echinacea.
Yeah. Now echinacea is any one on that list is gonna work. Now, when I'm dealing with a really acute infection, if I have more than one herb on that list for any category, if I have more than one herb, I'm likely to combine them.
Yeah.
I really like using 2 or 3 herbs at a time, especially for bacteria and viruses, because each herb has its own active constituents. And I want to, some herbs, now this is really technical, you don't need to know this, but some herbs are really good with gram-positive bacteria. Some herbs are really good with gram-negative bacteria. If I'm going to combine 2 or 3 antiviral or antibacterial herbs, I'm sure to have a very broad spectrum activity. So if you only have one, use one. If you have 10 antibacterial herbs in your cabinet, reach for 2 or 3 of them and mix them together. And so you can get the different mechanisms of action and get the most out of using the plants synergistically rather than just one. But if all you have is one, you're in a really great spot. Okay, so you're going to address the bacteria. I'm going to be taking that probably 2 or 3 times a day. Bladder infections tend to be pretty acute with pretty miserable symptoms. Well, after we address that, what are the symptoms? What else it goes on when you have a bladder infection?
Pain,
Okay,
possibly a fever.
yeah. I'm going to use a demulcent herb to soothe painful, irritated tissues. Anytime you have anything going on with the urinary tract, you're going to use a demulcent, no matter what you're treating, anytime in the urinary tract, because those tissues are really prone to inflammation and irritation. Comfrey, mallow, slippery elm, those are the rock stars in that category. So I'm going to be using a demulcent. Let's say that the fever that I have, let's say I have fever and chills and I can't get warm. What herb am I going to use when the fever presents that way?
Let's see.
Antipyretics. Did I say it right?
You said it right, but there's another category that deals with fevers that is going to be better for me if I'm getting chills and I can't get warm. Antipyretics reduce, they help maintain a controlled fever, but they're more cooling. So I'm going to reach, if I'm having chills, I'm
I
going to
Yeah, I
reach
said that. Thank you.
the diaphoretic or a sudorific, which is kind of the same category. They're just different terms for the same use, basically, but they induce perspiration and they will create warmth. My favorite thing to do at the onset of any kind of infection is to get in a hot bath with a few dropperfuls of ginger tincture. And then you bundle up and go to bed. My teenagers are trained so well that they will go in and give themselves ginger baths when they feel a cold coming on. A lot of times just that can knock a cold out because it stimulates the immune system and the body will fight off whatever is invading. But if I'm presenting with a fever, I don't want to take Tylenol or Motrin to bring that fever down. That's the immune system trying to fight the invader, which in this case would be a bacteria. I want to support that, but control it and find comfort and relief from the symptoms. So if I'm chilled and I can't get warm, I'm going to use one of those sudorific herbs that bring on heat a little bit. Any one on the list would be fantastic. Chamomile would be a great choice for a child or an adult. But if my fever is really, really high, and if I'm already sweating, because you want sweating during a fever is good. That means your pores are open. If I'm already pretty hot and my body's doing a pretty good job getting the fever going, then I'm going to use a febrifuge herb, which is, I think on here I have it as an antipyretic. I'm going to use an herb that's going to be more cooling. It doesn't override the fever like medication would. It still supports and maintains that fever, but it regulates the temperature in case it's getting a little too hot. So I'm going to use one of those. I'm not going to combine it with a hot bath if I'm already hot enough. I would probably just give it a few dropperfuls by mouth. And then if I'm really, when you have a fever, even though it's a good thing, there's that achy, sick feeling where you just feel like your bones ache. The best thing in the world for that is there's 3 essential oils that I love to use. Peppermint with tea tree or either one by itself mixed with eucalyptus. peppermint, tea tree, or eucalyptus. If only you have one, use one. I love to mix them together just because I have such a good selection. I get to play with things and mix them together, but it's not necessary. I just take some of those oils in the palm of my hand, squirt in a little bit of carrier oil, because you always dilute them with the carrier oil, and just put a few drops of each and rub it over the chest and the back and on the bottoms of the feet. And they are so cooling and so refreshing. And it just really helps with that achy, sick feeling. But you're not overriding any of the body's natural signals. You're supporting the body, which is the main difference between herbs and pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are designed for symptom suppression, but herbs and essential oils, plant-based medicines, never override the body's natural healing signals.
So you said those three were,
Those are my favorites. If you have a good essential oil book, you can just look up fever, and most of the ones that you'll see listed are going to be, or febrifuge. You're looking for febrifuge cooling oils, but those three are my favorites
okay.
because they work so well. Okay, let's see what time it is. Oh my goodness, time goes so fast. Okay, I
do have a quick question, Michelle.
Yes, go ahead.
What if you have an individual, because most people, like if you're diabetic, or in my family have some siblings where they've had a chronic bladder infection. Is there something you recommend that they can take, like a preventative, or anything you would recommend for a chronic?
I've actually dealt with this several times in clients, and in my experience, a chronic multiple recurring bladder infections is really one bladder infection that never got cleared up.
Oh, okay.
So what I would do is I would combine several different really good antibacterial herbs, because you want as broad spectrum as you can get. So I would do more than one, and I would take it for an extended period of time with lots and lots of marshmallow or comfrey to make sure that you really get that out of the system. If that doesn't clear it up, then I would start looking at what's the source of the bacteria? What is there something that's
Reinfecting them?
Yeah, something that's facilitating not being able to get that bacteria out. It is possible that they have, a suppressed immune system, so the body's just struggling to fight that off. I would start looking in other systems throughout the body to see maybe if something else is going on and you're not just dealing with a common, bacterial infection. But I have seen it multiple times where chronic infections, especially bacterial infections and fungal infections, are sometimes really, really hard to get rid of. So you take really good herbs for a longer period of time. So in the time that we have left, I want to talk to you about COVID.
Perfect, because my brother has COVID in the hospital.
Okay. COVID is a really interesting thing because the symptoms are all over the place.
Mhm.
So I want to kind of talk to you about just some basic things related to COVID. So the underlying cause is pretty straightforward, right? What is it?
Viral.
It's a viral. Okay. My favorite viral blend is called RC. We talked about it in our class last week. It's available, the recipes in the Butterfly Express book. I buy the herb pack and tincture my own. The reason that I like it is because it has about 20 things in it that covers all my bases, right? So if I had a kid who started showing signs of coming down with cold or flu, I don't care if it's COVID, I don't care if it's the flu, I don't care if it's the standard cold, my protocol is going to be the same. I'm going to start them on an infection fighter like RC or a combination of antiviral herbs, and I'm going to have them in the bath in a ginger bath. That's my protocol, no matter what it is you're coming down with. So you're going to be treating the virus, okay? And then you're going to be treating the symptoms you're having at the time. And people with COVID have symptoms all over the place. There's an interesting thing with the immune system called a cytokine storm. And some of you that are familiar with herbs may have heard this before. A cytokine storm is when the body's immune response kind of goes into hyperdrive. And there's an inflammatory response that usually affects the lungs that people will basically drown in their own immune response. So it's an overactive immune system that causes the cytokine storm. That is what made the 1918 Spanish influenza epidemic so deadly, is because it was a cytokine storm. And the way that you know if you have a cytokine storm that's playing a role in the severity of an illness is who's being affected. Because normally in a viral condition, you're going to expect the very old, the immunosuppressed, and oftentimes the very young to be the ones that are at risk, because they're the ones who have a weakened immune system. With the Spanish influenza pandemic, it was young, strong people who were going down with that because they were the ones that had the strongest immune systems, and it was their immune response that was causing the inflammatory response. Okay.
Mhm.
So when COVID came on the scene, late 2019, early 2020, everybody, all the herbalists were talking about the cytokine storm. And I had a lot of people asking me, are you worried? What do you think? What should we do? Teach us what to do, blah, 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 blah. And I just remember saying, I'm going to watch who is affected by this, and then I will know if I should be concerned or not. Because if it's the elderly, those with comorbidities, those who are immunosuppressed, I'm not going to get that worked up, because that's a normal viral pattern. That's what you would expect in any kind of a viral illness. If it starts taking out strong, healthy 20 and 30-year-olds, then we have something on our hands that could be kind of hard to deal with. So this is how you know if you have a cytokine storm, okay? A lot of your antiviral herbs are also immune stimulators. They have both of those actions. If I'm giving my traditional normal protocol of antiviral herbs, which are also immune stimulators, if it seems to work for a while, but then 3 or 4 days later, they're hit hard with the recurrence and they get sicker than they were to begin with, I have to stop giving those herbs, because you probably have a cytokine storm on your hands and they are having an inflammatory immune response, and I have to stop giving herbs that are stimulating the immune system. So let me give you a list of herbs that if you have that happen, so immune stimulating viral herbs, let's look on the list. Let me look on here. Antiviral herbs, okay. Elderberry is a common one that's great to give in the case of a cold or flu, okay? Elderberry is a great antiviral, but it's also immune stimulating. So is echinacea. If I have someone who's getting sicker after taking those herbs, after seeming to get better, and then they have a rebound, I have to stop giving herbs that are immune stimulating. I'm going to switch to, there's 2 herbs that I love. One of them is olive leaf and one of them is grape leaf. Those are herbs that would be good to have in your emergency preparedness, because cytokine storms, because they take out young, strong, healthy people, they actually can be kind of scary. You want to be able to deal with the virus without stimulating the immune system. So all I would do if I had someone who had that kind of a response is I would switch the antiviral herbs I'm using. I'd stop giving elderberry, stop giving RC, and I would stick with olive leaf or grape leaf. That's just what I would use. So then you have the symptoms that you're having right now. And so if you're having respiratory symptoms, I'm going to be giving herbs that have the appropriate respiratory response. If you're having, I mean, the symptoms are all over the place with COVID. You've got people who are having pulmonary embolism. You've got people who are having blood clots elsewhere in the body. You've got people who are having heart problems. All you're going to do with those symptoms is say to yourself, okay, what's happening that I'm trying to impact? Look at the categories of herbs, and you just work the categories like we've been doing here in this class. You just use the herbs that are going to impact the body in the way that you in the way that you want. So that's my take on COVID. We don't need to fear it. We do the best we can with the tools that we've been given, and then we have priesthood power, right? We do all we can do, and we use the power of the priesthood, which makes up the gap, right? Okay, so let me look at my time to make sure, because I could talk all night about herbs. So this is a great time for questions. Does anybody have questions about anything that we've talked about, or even anything we haven't talked about?
So my brother is still in the hospital with COVID, and he never really listens to me. He's not really into herbs or anything. But I'm just wondering, he almost died. He's underlying diabetic. He's 48, but pretty healthy overall. He's got a dry cough, which they said is good now. I just don't know what for the long term you would recommend. Would you do something like elderberry?
Well, okay, so you've got to be addressing the virus somehow.
Yeah.
You've got to be doing that. If he's having an inflammatory response.
Yeah, his lungs were full of fluid.
Okay, so I'm not going to go in with herbs that stimulate the immune system. I'm going to stay away from elderberry.
Okay.
I'm going to go with one of the other ones that I mentioned.
Yeah.
If he's having a dry cough, yeah, I'm going to be looking at demulcent herbs. I will tell you something about COVID. One of the things that was concerning to me were the people that were having the kind of response that you're talking about with the fluid in the lungs. I mean, that's not a result of the virus itself. That's the immune response. They're drowning in their own immune response, right?
Yeah.
So I can share this with you because we're all of the same faith, right? But yeah. I was pondering, Heavenly Father, what do I give? What do I give if someone's having an inflammatory respiratory response? What do I give? What do I give? And I was in the temple. This was, March of 2020, before everything shut down. I was in the temple, and the Spirit said to me, as clear as day, lobelia and gumweed. Gumweed is actually an herb that I've learned more about in the last year, because it hadn't really come on my radar until the Spirit said it to me in the temple, and I thought, oh, I better learn about this herb. Lobelia not only is a relaxant and an expectorant, but it's a bronchial dilator. And I think that's why lobelia is called for in this case, because it will dilate the bronchial passages. Okay. And gumweed is really, really good at getting gunk out of the lungs. For someone who's really sick like that, I'm also, let's see. I mean, if he's got fluid, I'm going to be looking at diuretic herbs that are going to stimulate the kidneys to pull fluid out of the tissues. I'm going to be looking at astringent herbs to dry up those secretions. You know, you just look at the categories and ask yourself,
Yeah.
what do I need to do with the body? And you pray. The thing I found about herbs is the Lord knows each of these plants intimately, right? He knows everything about them. He wants to teach us how to use them. We know that he gave them to us so that we could learn about them. Of course, he's going to help us know how to help ourselves and others use this tool that he gave us. So pray, do your part by reading when you can, study when you can. Don't expect the Spirit to give you information when you have not done due diligence to put it in your mind in the first place. You know, you do the best you can, but you pray and the Spirit will speak to you. Just like in the temple, when I was asking Heavenly Father, what do I give? What do I give? I heard it as clear as day, lobelia and gumweed. I mean, the Spirit will speak to you, but so don't underestimate the power of the ability to receive personal revelation in using the God-given tool that he wants us to learn how to use, right?
Yeah.
So let me check my time again, okay, so if we have other questions, now's a great time to ask. Otherwise, I'll kind of go through some things where I've just kind of talked about the protocols that I use for some basic things.
Have you, are you aware of ivermectin? I've heard that that's super effective
Yes.
on COVID, and I don't know what it's made of, you know, whether it's herbal or what it is.
So ivermectin is not herbal, but I have researched it and I feel like it's something that I should probably have in my toolbox. So I actually went down to Cal Ranch in the horse section and got some ivermectin for about $5 a box. It tells you how to dose it. It's made for horses. So it tells you, you just have to scale down the dosing instructions for humans. It's based on weight. But the things that I learned about it made me think that it was a valuable thing to reach for. I would still use herbs first. That's still my first choice. But I sure like having something else as a plan B. This virus, I mean, let's be honest, this virus is really squirrely. It does things that viruses don't normally do.
Mhm.
It's not behaving like any virus we've ever seen before.
That's because it's a man-made plague.
Well, I agree with you. There's something strange going on with this virus. So the symptoms are all over the place. So I've never before gone to Cal Ranch to buy any horse medication because my herbs are always enough. But this one kind of made me think, you know, if you find something that the Spirit prompts you to add to your emergency preparedness, I'd go do it, because we don't really know where we're headed with this.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm going to kind of stray a little bit away from it, but you were talking about dosing, talking about ivermectin, but how do you, just in general, and I'm looking more at hypotensives, blood pressure reducers, in case we are unable to get blood pressure meds. My son has high blood pressure, my husband does. I've gotten him from 5 meds down to 2 that he's taking half doses now, and most of that's been from getting him eating good and introducing a lot of different turmeric and just tons of different things that are really good for your body anyway to help heal. But we have yarrow, and I already have made tincture, but I don't know why I didn't think of it. I've used it for other things and it's really good for that. And I've done some research now, but I'm kind of stumped on the dosing. You have said 10 to 20 drops of some things, and then you've said a dropper full of some things. And I'm
Okay.
like,
Okay.
a little,
The average dropper full is about 15 drops.
Okay.
Okay, so when
Yeah.
I say, so we're in the same dosing. Now, when I make, so in the interest of time, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about medicine making because all the information is in the files that I've posted on my
Yeah.
site. But generally speaking, when you're making a tincture, you're going to use anywhere from a 5:1 to a 10:1 ratio, somewhere in there. 5 parts liquid, whether it's alcohol or glycerin and water mixed together, 5 parts liquid to 1 part herb, all the way up to 10 parts liquid to 1 part herb. That's your ratio, usually. So 10 to 20 drops of that concoction is a very safe range to be in. Now, one thing that I use that we don't even have time to get into here is I use muscle response testing to test dose. Okay, all muscle testing is accessing information that the body already knows.
Yes.
Sometimes I've had people test up for herbs where they needed 40 drops at a time for a dose. Generally speaking, herbs are very forgiving. They're not like medications for the most part, unless you're dealing with restricted herbs, but we're not talking about any of those here today. Herbs are very forgiving. You have a wide margin of error, 10 to 20 drops. If you stick with that as the dose, it's the number of times per day that you kind of play with. If someone's in a really bad situation, I'm going to be dosing something 3 times a day. And then as they get better, beware that herbs can and do interact with pharmaceuticals, and herbs can potentiate, make pharmaceuticals stronger. So so if you're dealing with, especially with heart medication, I'm sure you know that like pray about that one first.
Yes, I will.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
drop.
though. That's answered a lot of questions. Thank you very much. I didn't even think of muscle testing either. And thank you for bringing that up because that's such a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's a great tool. And I'd love to teach a class on that.
I'm interested.
Okay,
Me too.
well, we'll take a vote at the end of the class. So let me just go really fast. I'm going to go fast because this information is you get a copy of this PowerPoint that you can go in and get these later, okay? Let me see here. Stomach ulcers, calendula and comfrey together are the best things in the whole world to address bacteria, viruses, and to heal. Because remember, these are both vulnerary herbs, and comfrey's antiviral and antibacterial. The best things in the world. Now, if you have bicarbonates like baking soda, that can provide temporary relief of the symptoms of the neutralizing the stomach acids while the body is healing. But stomach ulcers can also be caused by excessive use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So too much ibuprofen can wear a hole in your stomach. But luckily, the Lord gave us comfrey to heal it. One thing that's said about comfrey is anything that is broken or torn, inside or out, comfrey will heal it. That belongs in your emergency preparedness supplies. Shingles. Oh my gosh, shingles. If you've ever had shingles, you know how desperate for relief you can be. Geranium essential oil will heal the shingles sores. Ravensara, which is strongly antiviral. And there's a blend by Butterfly Express called Deeper. doTERRA has a blend called Deep Blue that I believe would work just the same because they contain the same kind of categories of oils. It's a muscle relaxant anti-inflammatory blend. That's what you're looking for with the oils. They work along the nerve signals where that virus lays dormant, and will get it at that level. Pain relief and tissue regeneration with Ravenzara and an anti-inflammatory oil blend. I would be using antivirals. Ravenzara is strongly antiviral as an essential oil, but I'd also be taking herbs internally because I try to work from every angle that I can. RC from Butterfly Express is my go-to blend for any kind of infection. Calendula topically for pain. Chamomile, chickweed is also good. I would be adding that to some kind of a lotion or something just to rub on topically, but IV vitamin C will give almost immediate relief from pain. So that's shingles. Arthritis and joint pain, I see a lot as an herbalist. You're going to treat those with anti-inflammatories. Meadowsweet and willow are basically aspirin on a stick. It comes from the young green bark. So that's anti-inflammatory. Anti-inflammatories will usually help with pain because they're relieving the inflammation that's causing the pain. An interesting thing about arthritis and joint pain that I just recently learned is that you want to also use a diuretic because diuretics stimulate the kidneys to increase urine production, and that helps the body flush out minerals and toxins that would get in and irritate the joints. So that's not a direct effect on the joints, but it kind of works indirectly to help with that pain. Cayenne powder is amazing for adding to lotions to use. In this case, to help with pain, it's amazing as a muscle rub. I would just use like the kind of powdered cayenne that you have in your herb cabinet, and use it topically anytime you need to relieve pain and bring blood to the surface of the skin to help flush things out. And it also helps to deaden the nerve endings to help with pain. Rheumatoid arthritis has an autoimmune component. So I'd be using immune modulating herbs, which are your adaptogens. Yucca is an anti-inflammatory that has prednisone-like qualities. And one thing about red clover is that it will where did I go? Red clover will rebuild cartilage. If you have osteoarthritis, it takes quite a bit of red clover for long periods of time. So you have to be patient in taking it. But I mean, the fact that the Lord would give us an herb that rebuilds cartilage, herbs that make new skin cells grow, herbs that help regulate the heart and stimulate the immune system. I mean, there are things that herbs can do that pharmaceuticals could never hope of doing. And they do it without side effects and without doing harm. It's kind of miraculous if you think about it. Okay, this is one of my favorites because nobody believes that it's possible to heal cavities, but you can. I've done it multiple times. The first time that I wanted to do this, I had young kids at home at the time, and we had just been to the dentist, and I had 2 kids with cavities. And I was kind of learning about herbs that remineralize teeth. So I told the receptionist, I said, we are not going to schedule an appointment right now because I want to try something herbal to heal the cavities. Well, I'm sure you can imagine how far in the back of her head that lady rolled her eyes. Like she could not roll her eyes more back in her head than they were. I felt really like I kind of walked out of there just feeling like, oh man, this better work because I'm going to look like, I'm going to look like a total weirdo. So what I did is the protocol that you see here, I got Dr. Christopher's Herbal Tooth Powder that has the ingredients that you see listed. And as you look at those herbs, shave grass herb is full of silicone and it's just really nutritive. White oak bark is kind of a standby for any kind of dental, like periodontal disease. You got some really good astringents in there and really good nutritives. But I also take a couple of scoops of bentonite clay. It doesn't have to be Redmond brand. Any bentonite clay will do. and powdered birch bark. And I add enough so that when I look in the jar of truth powder, I can see bentonite clay and birch bark evenly mixed throughout. So that's not very scientific, but it doesn't have to be, right? Herbs are very forgiving. But I do it enough so that I can see it, that it's mixed in there with the other herbs. And we just mixed it with water in a little cup, maybe like 2 tablespoons of water with a half a teaspoon of the herbal mix to make a little mouthwash. And we swish it twice a day. We don't use regular toothpaste at my house. We brush our teeth with spearmint oil or refreshment blend. Spearmint oil remineralizes teeth. Now you show me a pharmaceutical that can remineralize your teeth without having something that's harmful for your body thrown in that you have to spit out or it will poison you, like fluoride. So we do this for at least 90-day minimum. It takes at least 90 days to repair a cavity. If the diet is really bad, if you have a kid that's only eating potato chips and corn dogs, the teeth cannot remineralize if the minerals are not present in the body in sufficient quantity. So I have to, with my son, my 12-year-old son, he needed some mineral supplementation. Butterfly Express has a blend called MIN that contains all the nutritive herbs that that I would like. So I just buy it already made I buy the herb pack actually and tincture it myself. So you have to supplement with minerals and really rich nutrient herbs. And when I took my kids back to the dentist, I told them, do not say anything about your cavities. Do not remind them that you had cavities. We waited 6 months. I said, do not remind them that you had cavities because I want them to be completely objective. Like, don't even bring it up. So my first child came out and said, the doctor looked at her teeth and looked at her file and said, wow, we must have made a mistake last time. We told you that you had a cavity and you didn't have one. That must mean that we got charts mixed up and someone else is running around out there with a cavity and they don't know they have one. So I thought, okay, you could chalk that up to a coincidence. But then my next kid came out and I said, what did the doctor say? And they said, nothing. He told me that my teeth look good and, I'll see you again in 6 months. And no mention was made of a cavity. And so we have in the dental records that there was a cavity. 6 months later, there were no cavities and there was no treatment given. So, you can't talk to the dentist about that though. It makes them feel very, very uncomfortable when you talk about healing cavities. They won't have that conversation with you. Eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis, any kind of skin rash, burdock root is the first thing you reach for. Oregon grape is another good one. I've cleared up a lot of cases of really bad eczema with these 2 things, burdock root and this Barlean's Omega Twin. I just give a couple of squirts in some yogurt and it will go away. One of the common treatments for things like this is a steroid cream. The problem with that is that all it does is push the symptom back into the body. They have found a link between kids who have used steroid creams as children to treat eczema that emerge with asthma later on, which are both inflammatory conditions. As herbalists, we know that when you push a symptom back into the body and you're suppressing the symptom, it will come out later as something else. It will. And that makes it harder for you to go in and address the underlying cause. That's why symptom suppression through pharmaceuticals is so bad, because you didn't get rid of it. You just pushed it deeper into the body, and it's going to emerge later as something probably worse and more complex. Okay, so that's psoriasis. Okay, this, I cannot teach a class on this and not teach you this. If you've ever had a dental abscess, you know that if you can't get pain relief for that, you would pretty much be willing to cut your own head off. It hurts that bad. I've had several. That's why, oh my gosh, that pain is so bad. Now I'm talking about an abscess, right? An infection that's inside the structure of the tooth. Okay, what's the doctor's solution for that? He's going to get in there and he's going to destroy the structure of the tooth with a root canal. Anyone who has a root canal will probably tell you that they have problems with that tooth, and like a lot of people have problems with infections and immune system issues and additional continued pain in the tooth sometimes, because you're going in and you're destroying tooth structure that can't be rebuilt. If you take a tea, make a tea with equal parts of cleavers, which is a lymphatic drainer, echinacea, which is antibacterial, and calendula, which is antibacterial and healing, that will help your body clear the infection, get rid of the infection. It opens, because of cleavers as a lymphatic, it assists the drainage of that infection through the tissues. Whoops. And will clear up an abscess without having to have dental work done. When you start to clear up the inflammation and the infection, the pain goes away. If you have a toothache, nothing beats cloves. Tincture form, essential oil form, fresh cloves out of your cabinet. You just kind of tuck it in there in the side of at the side of the pain, and it will numb it. Yarrow root is also good for that. Okay, it's 8:31. I'm gonna just see how many slides I have. Okay, well, I could talk for a whole class on just labor and delivery. So if we do another class, I will talk to you about labor and delivery. That's one of my favorite things to learn, actually. So where do you go from here? Okay, you have some information, you have some familiarity with different herbs, you understand therapeutic actions is where it's at, right? Understanding that. Well, you have to decide what kind of herbalist you want to be. If you're really only interested in emergency preparedness, which is a huge thing, that's a great thing to be interested in, go to the page where I have everything listed and print the files for the herbal binder, because that's kind of the focus of that herbal binder, is how to have a list of single herbs in your home that represent each category, and you know how to mix and match those herbs. Okay, you're going to want to store dried herbs and the supplies to tincture in your supplies, and then you're going to get that binder out and you're going to become familiar with how to use the herbs that you have so that you have that knowledge when you need it. If you want to do more to incorporate the herbs that we've talked about and to learn more into your life regularly and to kind of start treating things, get a good herbal book, learn about the herbs, their therapeutic actions, and then just pick something to start with. What do you see the most in your house? Is it cold and flu that you deal the most with? Frequent bladder infections? Just pick one thing and learn how to deal with it and get the herbs needed to treat that. And that's your jumping off point. And you may consider taking a more in-depth class. I've listed some really great programs. Most of them are online right now, but I've listed that in the information that I have posted on my page. And this is the page to go to. If you write down this website, that's pretty much all you need to know. If you look at the list of blog posts on the right-hand side, the very bottom one is Relief Society class. And you click on that and it takes you to a page with everything that I've talked about. It has my email address. It has a way to get in touch with me. I will answer any question that you have. There's a couple of Facebook groups that you could join. That's everything that you need to move forward from this point is listed for you. So my time is up. I will teach more classes if you want me to. I will teach as many classes as you want to learn. So you just have to give feedback. You can either message me directly, talk to Grace if you're in her ward. There are people on this class that are not in the ward. So just get a hold of me and let me know what you want. Get some ladies together, in another group, and I'll come and teach them. But it's been my pleasure to be with you ladies and to share this information that has changed my life and has enabled me to take care of my family and others. And that is my prayer for you, and to do it with gratitude and, ask the Lord to teach you about these things and to lead you to who to learn from, and he will. And I leave these things with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And we have Cece, who has graciously volunteered to give us the closing prayer. Is Cece still on? Grace, can you see if she's,
She is, but she's muted.
oh no. Cece, you have to unmute yourself.
Bottom left corner.